Today, we're going to talk about homeschooling and how well did you do? We know this spring was a tough time for many parents. For the first time in our nation, everyone had to be a homeschool parent. But as Emily's going to explain, we were crisis schooling, not homeschooling. And so we're going to have a discussion today about homeschooling. I have two experts with me. Today I have Mindy, writer of the blog, The Fervent Family. I have Andrea, homeschooler / teacher. And I have Emily, which is our other expert, homeschooler. And then actually, I was a struggling parent to homeschool my kids this spring. So we're going to have a discussion about homeschooling. Miss Mindy, what do you think? First, tell me about your kids.
Well, I homeschooled my kids their whole school life. I have 3 sons, and I also worked from home. So I own a medical newspaper. So one of the things I liked about homeschooling is I was able to work as well as homeschool my children, and they have all done extremely well. The one thing that I'm really proud of is that they all graduated high school with a bachelor's degree.
Oh, wow.
My youngest son actually graduated high school and with a bachelor's degree at 16 years old. Wow. And he is now a second-year law student. He was the youngest student ever admitted to South Texas College of Law. And my middle son is 19. He's finishing up his master's next week in music. And my oldest son is 21, and he's finishing up his master's in counseling in December. So homeschooling was a really great experience for us. What I loved about it is that we were able to customize everything. You can customize your schedule, you can customize the curriculum. You really have that opportunity to customize everything for each student and to help them excel.
Okay. Andrea, tell them how you and I did for homeschooling.
Well, I utterly failed it. I had a 16-year-old at home that refused to do any of the work that was given to him from his school district. It was a constant battle to get him up to get to do his work. If he did try to do it, he wouldn't turn it in. I think he turned in 1 assignment and did 2 Zoom lessons with his teachers online. No matter what I did, he fought me every step of the way.
Emily, tell us about your experience. Tell us what your kids are doing today.
Today I have 5 children. They range from 1 to 13 years old. But I also, when we started homeschooling 7 years ago, I was also homeschooling my sister-in-law, who was going into her 10th grade year. So I homeschooled her for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. She is now going into her 3rd year. She took a year break, but she's going into her 3rd year of college right now. And homeschooling for us has just been something that has drawn our family closer together. We're able to, like Mindy said, we can customize our lessons how we want them. If we decide in the middle of the day, hey, you know what, we need a vacation, we can take a vacation in the middle of the week without worrying about it. Are we falling behind? We just pick up where we left off when we come back. If we have a week where someone is just sick and under the weather, that's fine. They have that time to recuperate, to get well, and then we can go back into homeschooling, when they're better, without them missing any important tests or projects or anything like that. So homeschooling for us has really been something that it works for our family. It allows us so much more freedom to just live life and enjoy each other.
Okay. And so, Emily, really quick, tell us about crisis schooling versus homeschooling. What does that mean?
So crisis schooling is what a lot of parents have done this spring. You were thrown into, all of a sudden, your children are home all day with you, and you have to figure out how to get them to do their schoolwork, which some of it was during Zoom classes or online, or I know some schools sent packets home of school, and parents just weren't equipped. They weren't, it wasn't that they couldn't do it, it's just they didn't have the tools that they needed to, sit down and get the work done. A lot of the kids, like your son, were just like, no, my teacher's not here. I don't need to do this. My teacher's not here. Who's going to grade? Not realizing their parent is the teacher right now. Whereas homeschooling, we decide what the lesson is, when we're going to do the lesson, if we're going to do the lesson.
Okay, so I did, Andrea and I both had the same type of feedback from our students. I literally have a 8th grader that's going into 9th grade next year that actually made the varsity cheerleading team. And so when I would ask her, have you done your work? She would say, yes, mommy, I did my work. And then I would say, Annalisa, why am I getting an email from your teacher that you have not done your work? Mom, I did. I said, what did you do? She said, I did Spanish and I did history. I was like, Annalisa, you have like 8 more classes. What did you know? And she's like, but I did some work. I was like, no. And so there was this constant battle. But when it came to teaching math, and Mindy, this question is, or I want you to comment on this. When it came to teaching math to my freshman that's going to be a sophomore, I could not do, I don't do math. I'm special ed all the time. I do not do math at all. And you told me something that was surprising that a lot of parents don't know about that, or in some homeschools. When I asked you, I said, how did you manage to teach all that to all your kids? What did you tell me?
Well, my method, I'm not to say everybody does it differently, but my children are all 3 different ages. And so I knew early on that there was no way that I could come up with 18 lessons a day. And so the route that I took is I did not physically teach every lesson to my child. I researched and I found the best curriculum that offered the best method for each child. And all of their teachers were master's level doctorates, teaching them, but through a video or online or some method. But I actually did not verbally teach them every single lesson. I put the character into them to make sure that they were diligent in their school and that they had the right schedule and the right environment, and made sure that they did all their work and graded it to make sure that they were getting it and they were understanding it. And that's the beautiful thing about homeschool. You don't have to wait 6 weeks to get a progress report. You know that day if they're not getting it. But that's what I did. I utilized, there are so many different homeschooling curriculums and resources that are awesome, and you can use those qualified. And, you know, when you're in public school, not that there's anything against public school, but you don't have one teacher teaching every subject. But you may have a teacher teaching a couple of subjects, and they may be better at one, and one of them may not be their strength. But in homeschooling, you can actually get the absolute best teacher and the best method for every single subject in the best environment for your child to make sure that they get it, because that's really what you want, is for them to be able to retain it and understand it. So that's what we did.
Okay, tell us about your blog.
Okay, so my blog is really, it was started as I had several homeschool moms that would come to me and they would say, let's do coffee. I want to pick your brain and I want to find out what you're doing to homeschool your boys. And so I'm not a big coffee drinker. And so my blog was really a response to that, so that I could communicate with them and just point them to the blog on my responses to things. I am a researcher. So I own a medical newspaper. And so I guess that journalist in me comes out, but that's probably my strongest suit in homeschooling, is research, is putting in the hours to really look at all of the different curriculums, the different methods. There's so much that goes into, because every child has a different learning style, every child has a different attention span, every child has different interests. But the Fervent Family is pretty much a resource on some things that I have researched and feel strongly about certain curriculums. It doesn't have every curriculum that I'm passionate about. There's also a video on there where I've helped probably directly 30 or 40 families get their children with accelerated education to get them through college sooner. And so there's a video on there that details that, and that's gotten a lot of attention. Again, just because it was a lot of information to break down, it was easier just to put it on the blog.
Okay. Andrea, what do you feel, what kind of support do you think that if we had to go back and do this again, some schools in the United States, we already know that they may not go back. I think we here in Texas are going back, I think, tentatively. So what do you think you would have needed in place to help you be successful?
I would have liked to have had the lessons that I would have been able to sim. That was one problem that I had, was they would tell me it's all on his account. So I would have to then rely on him to get access into his account to see the work.
Because you can't get a teacher.
Right. And so then also when he would turn in assignments, which he would tell me he turned in, I would not know if they were turned in because I don't have access to show that it was turned in. So that was a lot of the problem, is that I couldn't see what he needed to be learning. So I couldn't do the research to find out what does he need to be getting out of this at this point. Where's he at this point? Because I would have to wait a couple days to see, once the teacher looked at it, graded it, or put it back into the system, was it turned in? I did contact all the teachers, but some of them would not contact me back. Some did not have access to email service with me, so I wasn't able to say, look, my son told me he was doing this assignment. Is this what they're supposed to be on? Has he turned it in? I would have to wait 3 or 4 days sometimes to find out he didn't turn in the assignment. By then, they're going on to a different assignment, and he's now further behind than he was before. So that was a real major problem. I'm like control.
So do you feel like you were crisis schooling, like Emily suggested? It wasn't like a true homeschool?
Compared to what I do myself as an educator, yes, because I know what the lessons are going to be. I know what the kids are supposed to be doing in my own room. But when it came to my son, it was very hard because they kind of switched things too. I mean, at first they thought they were only going to do it for a couple weeks, that we were going to be at home. Then it changed into the rest of the school year. So I think teachers too were having an issue of not knowing what they had to have ready for their kids and their students. So that didn't get pushed out to us either. Parents were sitting there going, at first I gathered too with mine, when he thought it was just going to be the first couple weeks, blew everything off.
Right.
Because he thought he was going to go back to school, and so what's the sense of really doing this work? It's no big deal. Then when they told him they were going to be there for the rest of the school year, he was already behind now.
But if they would have had maybe a parent portal, if you're going to go with the public school system, then a parent portal maybe would have been helpful. I know there are some curriculums that offer a parent portal. Or
I think my kid's school district did have a parent portal, but I didn't know how to. I could get into one of my kids, but couldn't get into the other.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
It's very confusing.
And if a parent didn't have access to internet, they weren't going to be able to get in. And so the parent portal would be great, but I think they would need to have an orientation at the beginning of the year. Part of that orientation, everything that you have to fill out, to where parents maybe come in and do it together and show us how to do it. Because I've called the schools in the past. I was like, I want to see one of my child's grades, and I could get in at one time, and then the next year I couldn't. And so the parent portal is a great idea if the parents can actually access it.
could parents, if they decide to not go back to, my hope was that more parents would get to kind of dip their feet in the water in homeschooling and would have an appetite for homeschooling. But if it became crisis schooling and was not a positive situation, then they probably won't want to.
I think what I'm hearing is that there was a both, just kind of there was both.
Okay.
So you have some parents, it's like, oh my gosh, I think I want to take this further. They're seeing what's going on and they're getting worried. Mm-hmm. I, for one, I cannot afford to homeschool, but is there something else that I can have for my kids? But then some of us, I know that I can't teach math. I would have to go with one of the models that you research and find somebody that could do it if I could afford that. Mm-hmm. But what about somebody that can't afford that and they want to homeschool their kids? Because there's both. Mm-hmm. There's the people that want to take the ball and they want to run with it, and then there's the parents that say, I can't do this.
Right. You're right. They're all.
So is there, between both of your models, and I think maybe your models were probably a little bit different, yes or no from what you hear from each other?
Well, so in homeschooling, one of the misconceptions is that you have to know it all to homeschool. You have to know everything on every single subject to homeschool. And that's the beauty of homeschool. When I was homeschooling my sister-in-law, no, Emily did not remember what trigonometry was.
See, I didn't know that. I just thought you was superstar. To this day, that's how I'm telling it.
You know, I remember going to trigonometry class. You know, I remember going to chemistry class. But no, I did not remember a single thing about, you know, what I actually did in those classes. And the beauty of homeschooling is you get to sit there with your child and learn with them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so if you don't know how to do it, this is a great time to teach them how to research, how to sit there and learn it on their, you know,
I'm hearing the R
reach
word
out.
a lot.
We have
Research. So that's probably going to be one of your keys, you know, as far as, you know, to parents, is that they need to take the time to do some research if they're going to move forward with homeschooling. So I guess in our discussion, what we've come up with is that this was not true homeschooling. And so in my head, it was homeschooling because my kids were at home. I was ready to try this out, and it was an epic fail. Emily, so let's go back through what this was.
So right now, your children all of a sudden were home every day, and you weren't able to leave it. Most places were on quarantine or on some sort of lockdown. So with true homeschooling, there are support groups that you can reach out to for assistance. Now, those not necessarily will always be the teacher of your child, because in homeschooling, you are the educator, you are the teacher, but homeschool co-ops that you could get extra help from, extra classes from. So my children, they are part of a homeschool co-op. We go once a week, and they do some of the other classes that I'm not good at. I have one child who, she took a martial arts class during one afternoon a week. I have another child who did a cookie decorating class. And a lot of people are like, well, she learned how to decorate cookies. Yeah, but she learned recipes, which involves reading, it involves math, so there are some co-ops that do extra elective classes like that.
So you have a very good experience with homeschooling, but is it always peaches and roses?
No.
But it's overcomable.
Yes. So one of the first things that I tell anyone who ever wants to homeschool is you need a decompression time. With the crisis schooling, no one got that. No one got a decompression time to learn how to live at home with their child. Summer break is there, but it's all fun and games during summer break. Once school starts, there has to be a decompression time for you to learn about your child, how your child learns, and your child has to realize, my parent over here is the one who's monitoring my schoolwork. If I don't do it, they know right away. It's not like a letter gets sent home or an email gets sent home and mom will find out or dad will find out, hours later, weeks later. It's right away. My mom knows I'm not working on math. My mom knows I didn't do my English assignment. And so for the crisis schooling, parents were just thrown into this mix where they didn't get a chance to see, what is my child learning? How is my child learning? Does my child work best in the morning, or does my child work best in the evening? And so, there are children who they are night owls, and you can get more productivity out of them at 6 p.m., at 10 p.m., versus waking them up at 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, and having them working at 8 a.m. I know for me, even though I was in the Army, and Emily does not do good waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. And so my kids know, hey, mom she's not a morning person. So therefore, we get more of our work done in the afternoon when everyone is more awake, when everyone is more productive. If I wake up my 8-year-old at 7 a.m. and say, hey, it's time to start reading, she's going to look at me like I'm crazy, and it's going to be a battle all day long. If I wait until later on and say, hey, she's up, she's had breakfast, she's gotten some time of running around, letting out some energy, she's worked on a craft project, then it's more likely that I'm going to get a more positive feedback from this kid to sit down and do a reading lesson. And so for crisis schooling, a lot of parents were they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to make their child sit down and do a lesson. And their child is like, my teacher's not here to see that I'm not doing the lesson, and I can just tell mom that I'm doing the lesson, and mom's going to believe me because mom doesn't know what I'm doing anyway. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I would hope that you would take it this time to connect with your child more, learn about what type of learning your child has. Are they a worksheets type of child? I have one child who I can give her a book, I can give her a worksheet, she can get it done, she knows what she did. I have another child who I give her a worksheet, it's going to be painted and glittered on, and she's not going to know a single thing on that worksheet. And then I have one who he has to be bouncing, he has to be moving when he's doing his. If we're learning the letter A, I can't just say this is the letter A. I have to say, hey, go find me the letter A around the house. And it makes him get up and move, and he's using multiple senses to find the letter A, which teaches him what the letter A is.
Andrea, in education, we know that as teachers, but I don't know, I just kind of thought my kids would just be different this time, and I think it would have been better if I would have known all along what their learning style was. And I know that my students have all different, and I've always adapted my classroom to include everyone, that way they can grow as they need it. So maybe that was one thing that was lacking. Maybe we need to know what our children's learning style is.
I do not know my son's learning style at all. I mean, he's 16, he's been in school his whole time. I get letters from the teachers on what he's like in his classroom, but that's not necessarily seeing him in a classroom setting doing his work. Also, the problem for me also was the fact that I didn't have the lessons ahead of time to look at them prior to him learning the information, where as a teacher, I have that already. Right. So I think that was part of the issue too with the home crisis teaching. Was just being thrown into it, not knowing where my child was at in school at the time. So I'm not sure where he was supposed to be. So I think those are things that maybe this time, if it happens again, schools are a little more prepared and parents can be a little more prepared. I think if I had those things, I would have been more successful, like these parents are with their homeschooling.
Mindy, was it always, just to the moon, and back with your kids? Was it always shooting for a star? Did you have some rough times?
I did. We started out homeschooling with this one all-in-one curriculum, and it worked for my oldest child. And then several years into it, my middle son was very distracted. And so at that point, I was like, okay, this isn't working. I mean, it wasn't working. And so I went to, it had always scared me to kind of piecemeal my curriculum together. I trusted like those names that people told you in homeschooling. And like a Becca, yes, we were doing a Becca. And it worked really well. I mean, it helps them be good readers and everything. But the videos were kind of long for my middle son. And I would find him distracted. He's out there with his gun trying to shoot a deer, or, I felt like I was trying to, glue him to the DVD player or whatever. But so I went to a homeschooling show, my first one ever. And he must have been maybe in the 3rd or 4th grade. And when I was there, I went by one of the booths, and there happened to be this man. He was a dad, and he was manning the booth for his wife, I think. And he was an attorney. He said, you were focusing too much on that Abeka and what Abeka does. He said, you need to focus on the method. And it was almost like an answer to prayer. So at that point, it catapulted me on this research thing, and started looking at the method. And so I found out that you can accomplish a lot of lessons in a shorter amount of time and just really high energy, concise lessons and where they get it, rather than having to be an hour lesson, you know.
Even in public school, we have breaks. We're supposed to transition after
Right.
20 minutes. We're supposed to, let them get up and move around, and the students do need movement. Emily and Mindy, if you can leave our parents with 3 things that they can do if they want to continue homeschooling, or for even this fall, if they're going to have to continue teaching their children at home, so it's not a crisis schooling versus homeschooling. What can you leave them with?
Well, one, take this opportunity to reconnect with your child. If your child and you are just on 2 different pages, then you're not going to get anywhere. Have this time to reconnect as a family, to remember what's important. Is it important for little Tommy to learn trigonometry right now at 6 a.m. on Friday, or is it more important for little Tommy to color for a little bit? Okay, just remember that, because I did see that a lot of parents were like, no, we've got to do this and we've got to do this and we've got to do this, and their child was just burnt out. Their child just didn't know what to do. So just reconnect with your child. Second, remember, at home, it's stressful for you, but it's stressful for them as well. This is a whole new environment for them. So don't just jump full force. Have some transition time. Remember that it doesn't have to be between 8 and 3 p.m. It can be from 3 to midnight. Well, not even that long, but it could be later in the day. And then just remember, at the end of the day, they'll learn how to read before they get to college.
It's funny.
That's my motto. They will learn how to read before they get to college.
Okay.
It's funny. I guess what I would like to leave them with is that please don't use this crisis schooling or this homeschooling experience as your decision-making model for if you want to homeschool in the future. If you've ever considered homeschooling, there are a lot of resources that make it a wonderful experience. So don't let this one crisis scenario be the decision-making model. I would just like to say that with homeschooling, that I wanted to homeschool for various reasons, but I never wanted to compromise my children's education. I never wanted it to be a step back of their education. I myself have a college degree, but it is not in math, it is not in science, it's in communications. And so I do not feel like I'm an expert in every subject, but I feel like I know how to find an expert in every subject. And I feel like at this stage, all of my sons are thriving. But one thing is that whether you homeschool or whether you don't homeschool, life is a school when you're a parent. And I feel like that sometimes we feel like all of the schooling happens at school, or it happens at Sunday school, or it happens at these things called school. And in my mind, when you were given a child, life became a school. You know what I mean? You may not be teaching them math, you may not be teaching them English, you may not be teaching them that, but you are teaching them how they make decisions, how they submit to authority, how they will be disciplined, how they will be responsible, how they will just every single thing about life. And so I think that we didn't become homeschoolers when we got into this crisis, that we've all been homeschooling all along.